When Paul Brown founded the Cincinnati Bengals, the Battle of Ohio could have been a marquee game every year in the NFL. This year's first Battle of Ohio, though, not looking like the shiniest matchup, but there's still stories to talk about and keys to victory. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, football fans, Browns fans, Bengals fans alike? This is a Locked On NFL crossover. I'm Jake Lisco, along with James Rapien from Locked On Bengals, along with Jeff Lloyd from Locked On Browns to get you ready to go for the first Battle of Ohio of 2024 in Cleveland. And, well, it's not as exciting as it could have been. The AFC North in our season preview we thought was going to be a hotly contested division. The way things have started for these teams, well, there's some work to do, let's say. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back to the everyday listeners. Shout out to those of you that make your Locked On podcast your first listen of the day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, of course, on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And today we will break down the biggest stories in the first Battle of Ohio. We'll get to some keys to victory later in the show for each team. And Jeff, a day after the Amari Cooper trade, we are talking about the Bengals playing the Browns in Cleveland. The Browns refusing to make a quarterback change. These are the stories from the outside that seem to be dominating discourse around the Cleveland Browns. What would you say are the biggest stories for the Browns offense today?
Well, the thing is, and the quarterback in the NFL is always going to get probably too much credit or maybe too much blame. And look, in this case, the blame is certainly warranted. But if you look at this team overall, there is not a positional unit, maybe besides linebacker, that is even performing close to where it performed in 2023. Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome, they are having severe issues. The defensive line, Myles Garrett is hampered. He's playing through it. He's not himself, but the rest of that defensive line is not performing like they were in 2023. The offensive line, there's been weeks we've gone into Sunday at 11:30 and not even known who the starting offensive line was. Whereas for, and as you guys know, as much as we've done these episodes and as much as the Bengals have played Cleveland, you know who the starting line was every day. And we were talking years. It wasn't weeks. I mean, season after season, it was the same offensive line. It was the same unit. Changes there. David Njoku misses time. Nick Chubb will finally make his return this week. The wide receivers are certainly were not playing as well as they were last season. It's a mess right now. And I think each week they try to say, oh, well, maybe we'll do a little bit more of this. So there's no consistency in anything they're trying to do. They had a nice fourth quarter last week. And guess what? Had a shot in Philadelphia to tie the game. They get it to third, and I think it was third and goal from about the 4 or the 5 yard line. You get a holding call. You get a false start. Next thing you know, you're kicking the field goal because it's just too great. They couldn't take the chance on, 4th and 20 of getting a touchdown. You get the field goal. You never get the stop. You never get the ball back. So there's really nothing that this team can rely on, or at least, basically, hang their hat on and say, all right, well, we can work around this because our defense is doing this, or we can, circumnavigate that because the offense is able to do that. They were able to run the ball a little bit better last week, but there's weeks where they couldn't run. There's just no rhyme or reason where this is going. And look, over the summer, we didn't get to know much. Their top 3 tackles did not participate until September. They didn't even start practicing until then. Some of them just actually started physically playing last week in Jack Conklin. None of the skilled players played in the summer. So it was hard to get a read on where anything was. And then you also got to keep in mind that this was a new offensive coordinator, all new offensive coaches. So we never saw any of the guys who were eventually going to be the stars. We saw all the understudies, nobody who's really playing now. And they weren't necessarily even playing well over the summer. So look, I don't know how it got this bad. Maybe, and I'm guilty, and I'm sure a lot of people are, that we just thought that maybe they're a little bit more consistent product these days. So once they got into it, they'd figure it out. But this team is a shell of what they were last year. They were a shell of what they were the last couple of years. Is the quarterback a major issue? There's no question about it. But even still, I mean, if you're saying, oh, well, is Jameis Winston all of a sudden going to take this from a 1-5 team to say a 4-2 team? Yeah, maybe he'd improve it a win or two, but I'm not saying all of a sudden it's just going to change where this team would have been 180 degrees.
Let's discuss the defense a little bit, because I think everyone is focused on the offense. And when they think of the Browns, they're thinking of Deshaun Watson, the Amari Cooper trade, and Nick Chubb's return, which is obviously a big deal. But defensively here in Cincinnati, we certainly think about Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward and the unique blend of talent they have on that side of the ball. And yet you said outside of linebacker, every position on the Browns has underachieved this year, not played up to the skill level that they did last year. Why? Why do you think that is? How is Myles Garrett, this defensive front, and this defense in general, how have they played through 6 weeks?
Well, Miles, there's an issue. And Miles, when he was a kid, had issues with his feet and actually had surgery when he was a kid. And apparently, maybe we're talking 10, 12 years now, but apparently now this is something that's starting to resurface. So the question is going to be, how far is he going to go this year? Can he go the entire season? We don't know. And Miles is certainly not going to tip his hat on anything like that. But you would understand that if maybe the season, when it is over, if it's not continuing, there's no reason to put him out there knowing that he's going to head for surgery anyway. But he's got 4 sacks. He had a nice game last week. Obviously, another huge, tremendous block field goal. Had a couple of tackles for loss in the backfield. But you could just see in his movement, he doesn't have all of what Myles Garrett is. Zadarius Smith, this is a move that, a lot of people, they thought he was going to be better in year 2. I still think you see that maybe Zadarius Smith's a lot closer to the end than the beginning. Ogbenaya Okoronkwo was more effective last season. You lost. I thought Alex Wright was going to have a big jump here in year 3. His season is over. Isaiah McGuire, this is year 2 for him now. He's not getting a ton of run. You don't see much there other than a rotational player. Maurice Hurst missed a lot of time. He was a player last year that's shown signs for them. You just got your 2nd-round pick, Mike Hall, last week for the first time this season. But, you look at Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome. These guys were really, really struggling. And these guys really took to Jim Schwartz's system last year. They were really good in man coverage. And this allowed Jim to do what he wanted to do, get after the quarterback. I'm going to play man coverage. Well, the game, Philly didn't have to do it. They pretty much had the game in hand, but they just went deep, basically just to kill the clock, got the first down to A.J. Brown. Greg Newsome had no chance and covered him. He had beaten Martin Emerson earlier in the game. So, Denzel can go wherever he wants, and they're starting to do that now. They're having Denzel basically trail one receiver, which they never did. They had confidence in the other guys, but it kind of just makes it even easier. So it's okay, well, if Denzel's over there, we're just going to work left, or Denzel's over here, we're just going to work to the right. We'll work around that. They're just not playing as a unit. They're missing way too many tackles. And even last year, they did miss tackles, but they had hats to the football. So even if somebody missed a tackle, yeah, you had a missed tackle, but the guy basically still got the same amount of yardage because you were coming 2 and 3 deep at the ball carrier or anybody with the ball in their hands at all time. It's just not like that right now. And, certainly when a team is like they are at 1-5, you're going to question effort. I don't know if that's going to be the case where you're going to point it at all 53 guys. But, there's times where you see some stuff that's just ultra sloppy, and it does, it just brings up into your head, are you into it? And a lot of it has to do with, if you're in a locker room and if you don't have confidence in your own quarterback, it makes it really difficult to go out there because you feel like you have to play up to a level of perfection.
I think tackling will be an issue that we're both talking about a little bit this week, something that these teams may or may not have in common. We will continue with the biggest stories for the Cincinnati Bengals ahead of the first Battle of Ohio coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on the latest Ellie De La Cruz or Joe Burrow or Nick Chubb rookie card, well, it just isn't in the cards. And if you love collecting, but you don't want to spend that crazy serious amount of money, slab packs from arenaclub.com are the way to go, because now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of the retail price. Every card that I mentioned was a hit from last week's Arena Club slab pack. So whether it's Luka, whether it's Ellie, whether it's Patrick Mahomes, Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and explanation of how your card was scored. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase.
Looking to go to this week's Battle of Ohio in Cleveland? It doesn't matter which fan base you are. Anybody can make that drive. Maybe you still need tickets. Well, Game Time will have you covered with Game Time picks that makes it easier to get tickets to see your favorite team play. It filters out all the fluff and only shows you the most incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And not only that, with Game Time, we've told you about these perks if you've listened before, but it makes buying tickets informed and easy. You'll get panoramic views from your seat. You will not have any deceptive pricing. They'll show you all in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout. They also have their lowest price guarantee. If you find tickets that match the price elsewhere, they will credit you 110% of the difference. And that is some true peace of mind when buying tickets for a football game. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, you create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll save an additional $20 on your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON, NFL, for $20 off your purchase. You can download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, guys, let's talk about the big stories in Cincinnati this week. Still in desperation mode are the Cincinnati Bengals. James, you have, as you're sitting where Joe Burrow talked not too long ago, been in the building today as the Bengals are preparing for week 7. Still very much the vibe that they're treating every week as we're still trying to find ourselves. We still need to win this game however we can. And as we've talked about on Locked On Bengals this week, a game that for the Bengals could mirror some of the themes we saw in week 6 against the Giants.
Yeah, for sure. It certainly could. And that will be a theme. Joe Burrow mentioned that as well. I think from a vibe standpoint in the building and an urgency standpoint, and I think that would be the theme. Joe Burrow mentioned urgency a couple of times. When you're 2-4 and you're expecting to be really good and you still think you're really good, well, you got to go show it. And the interesting balance between that in this matchup, Joe Burrow is 1-5 against the Browns. Joe Burrow has not won in Cleveland, even though early in his career had a really great battle. I always mention it because people just say, oh, he's always struggled in Cleveland. He played one of his best games to me in Cleveland, a week 2 Thursday night matchup his rookie year against the Browns. Threw 61 passes that game, kind of carried them in a 35-30 loss. But he hasn't won in Cleveland. And now the Browns' backs are certainly against the wall, and the Bengals' backs are against the wall. So something's got to come to a head here. And so I think that's the main sort of theme this week going into the game is, one, it's a must-win for the Bengals. At the same time, they have to get over this hump that even if they were 6-0 would be discussed. And this storyline of them being 1-5 in Joe Burrow's career when starting against the Browns and not winning up there. Lou Anarumo mentioned that to the defense. Hey, we haven't gone up there and won. And they have, but it's been games where the Browns, I'm thinking, actually, no, they have. I was thinking they won, but they won the last Freddie Kitchens game, but that was here in Cincinnati. So, yeah, they actually have never gone up there and won. I thought they had done one of those games, but have never done it in the Zach Taylor era.
But you look at it, though, and for me, you look at the life here of both teams. I think I see more coming out of Cincinnati right now than I do, obviously, coming out of Cleveland. I think Cincinnati maybe knew they were going to have some issues, aka the defense. But basically, when you're all in on the offensive side of the ball, as the Bengals are, you got to understand that you're going to take your lumps. You're going to maybe have your deficiencies other places rather. But how has that worked? Because I know the defense has obviously already suffered some losses of guys that they were actually hoping were going to be guys that maybe were going to step up this year.
Yeah, I think defensively you lose Dax Hill, and that's a big loss. But they're about as healthy as they've been since maybe, Jake, when you were in town. I mean, in the middle of training camp. I mean, so you're talking August 6th, August 7th. They really are, because Miles Murphy went down shortly after that, and they lose B.J. Hill and Sheldon Rankins week 2. They lose McKinley Jackson. Were you here when McKinley got hurt, Jake?
I was. I did see him walk over to the cart right in front of me. There's also the Sam Hubbard injury while I was in town that he's still dealing with.
Are you allowed back or no?
Yeah, I don't know.
But that's the point is this defense. Yeah, they were awful. Or there was a stretch where they were just really bad, but they were also nicked up. And clearly depth is an issue, but they are as healthy as they've been all season and even dating back to the early stages of training camp. So can they keep Deshaun Watson down? Can they not let Nick Chubb look like Nick Chubb pre-knee injury right away? Right? Those are two huge things that they have to do, I think, because we know how this Browns defense matches up with this Bengals offense.
It has always been an issue. And when I look at the Bengals defense, Jeff, in particular, one of the things I'm looking at this week is the Browns have been a putrid offense this year, statistically, by like every measure. One of the worst Browns offenses
You're being too
ever,
kind.
as Austin Gale has pointed out each week when asking the Browns to make a quarterback change. Just make the quarterback change, guys. Just do it. Bite the bullet. And they continue to not go in that direction. Meanwhile, the Bengals have played against the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Washington Commanders, some of the higher producing offenses in the NFL this year. Those have been some of their worst games. They also had issues with the Andy Dalton Panthers. It wasn't as bad as those other three games, and that's a bit of a worrisome one. But those were games where they were also quite injured or sustaining injuries. So as James points out, when you look at this matchup, it's not just can the Bengals defense play better? It's, well, maybe there's an answer there about the quality of the opponent. Maybe they can string performances together against some offenses that are less complete, less explosive in the Giants and the Browns now this week. But the skepticism around the defense persists. And I think even though the Browns have played as the Browns have this year, the Bengals going to Cleveland, given their recent history in that environment, there's still concerns around how this defense is going to play even this week.
For sure.
Yeah, but I think part of it though is the Browns haven't been home in 3 weeks. And so obviously these people are going to really, really excited, but I don't think it's going to have anything to do with the crowd's, loudness towards Cincinnati. I think it's going to have to do with them setting their frustrations out on the home team. I can only imagine what it's going to be like when number 4 comes out of the tunnel as introduced, because look, these people did not like him to begin with. And it was one of those things, look, you cannot like something, but if it's working, you'll find a way to swallow it. That's not where they're at. And, I honestly thought maybe it would be better for Cleveland to go on a 3-game, basically, road trip to get away. But it's only gotten significantly worse each and every week. So, the hostility is probably going to be at an all-time level. I mean, we could be talking a crowd, similar to maybe like the Hugh Jackson era, because they're aggravated, they're agitated, and, all the stuff. And, it does this hold the franchise back further down the road. It doesn't if Jimmy just wants to keep opening up his wallet. It doesn't, because if he wants to do that, it's not going to hold up the way the roster is structured. But, everybody's frustrated. Everybody's aggravated, and to sit here and come on every day and say, I don't understand why you continually start Deshaun Watson. I did open to show a post-game show the other day, and it was basically the definition of insanity. When you repeat the same thing, nothing changes, but you expect to get different results. Even still, if you went out there and said, you know what, Deshaun, just played left-handed this week. Let's just try something different. But you paid Jameis Winston $4 million. Jameis Winston, 5,000-yard passer, Pro Bowler, has played more recently and had some success when Deshaun Watson was not within the league. I don't. And the thing is with Jameis knows he's not athletic, so he's not going to leave ghost pressure. He'll take the beating and he'll do everything he can to get the ball off. He's just not going to take the ball and look to tuck it and run. And the problem is, you get in that what Deshaun has is now he has no conception of what is a clean pocket or when he is actually truly being pressured. I think that's how mentally confused he is right now. And, it just, again, it's just, and Nick Chubb comes back. So that should be a great moment for, the few minutes on Sunday. But the fact of the matter is, what is he going to get? 7, 8 touches? I don't think anybody expects, Nick Chubb is just going to come in here after that catastrophic injury and all of a sudden be the guy that can go for 20. It's unrealistic.
It'll be fascinating to see the crowd element of this play out. That crowd has historically been a thorn in the side of the Bengals on these road trips to Cleveland. And the way you're talking about them,
If they get up, they'll cheer for him. But they are ready. Trust me, they are ready to unleash on Sunday if it doesn't go well.
That's a bit of foreshadowing as we get into our keys to victory. We will do that coming up next.
This crossover episode is sponsored by FanDuel, which is the best place to get your NFL bets in this weekend or before. The line in this game is growing in Cincinnati's favor. The Bengals now 6.5-point road dogs in Cleveland, where if you would have told me that was a line before the season, I would have been a little bit surprised. But beyond just the line and which team is favored and how many points they have, FanDuel gives you the option to bet on really fun props. The ones that I like to look at every week are scoring in all 4 quarters. You think the Browns are going to score in all 4 quarters this week? You can get that at plus 410 on FanDuel right now. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check those stats. You can get the live play-by-play and do so much more in the same place you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can get into it today with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook at FanDuel.com.
And no, Cleveland will not score in all 4 quarters.
Let's talk about those keys to victory. If Cleveland does score in all 4 quarters, well, the Bengals may be in trouble. But Jeff, from your perspective, as you think about how the Browns could carve out a path to victory in this game at home, their first home game, as you mentioned, in 5 weeks, I guess, 4 weeks, depending on the way you think about that. What are the 3 things the Browns need to go right to win this game?
I'm going to start with this and trying to be positive. The Bengals don't have much film to go off of here, because what have you seen from the Browns to this point? You've seen 12, 13 targets a week thrown at Amari Cooper. They're not throwing that much because Deshaun Watson is getting sacked a lot. It's going to be a little bit difficult to game plan, because, you don't know what to expect from Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Tillman's figures to see more snaps. Elijah Moore, David Njoku's back. Nick Chubb is, of course, back. The rookie Jamari Thrash should get some run. So basically, the Bengals are going to have to be the guinea pig for whatever the Browns are for the next couple of weeks. I don't expect all of a sudden we're going to see, the Bill Walsh playbook come out and all of a sudden things are going to look hunky-dory. But again, the Bengals are basically just going to have to play straight up and see what's coming at them. So that was an advantage that maybe the Browns do have for them. The other advantage is, look, in games like this is a good opportunity for both teams, because you don't really have to overthink it. These 2 rosters know each other extremely well. They know what the Bengals can give them. The Bengals know what the Browns can give them. So, yeah, it's going to be an advantage for somebody. It's certainly going to be a disadvantage for somebody else, obviously, in this game. But it sounds so sad to say, but put together consistency. Put together 4 quarters of football, things that carry over. There's been times where, last week you get to half, 10-10. All right, things look really good, right? All right, they got the ball second half. They're already at the 30. Hey, it's 3rd and inches. All right, James is on. Here comes the QB sneak. No, we run a jet sweep to Cedric Tillman, who hasn't touched the ball in 3 weeks. You just find a way to shoot yourselves in the foot, or you overthink it, or you just try to be more than you are. Keep it simple, stupid, simple. That's it. Just go out there and play the game. Understand what you have from Nick and what you don't. It's probably going to be 2 to 3 touches per quarter at best. Work around that. But, it's sad that you have to go to the simplicity of this, but that's really where the Browns are at. It's literally making sure you tied both shoes correctly before you get on the field.
And make sure that you have a left and a right shoe. As we continue to review our keys to victory in Crossover Thursday presented by Prize Picks, you can download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly with your first $5 play. James, your thoughts on any of the keys to victory that Jeff mentioned, or the keys for the Bengals themselves?
Yeah, I think tying your shoes is important. I think the Browns will be good there. As far as the Bengals are concerned, let's start here. You have to start fast. The Bengals get their butts kicked by the Browns every time they don't start fast and they get behind. And Baker Mayfield, after Odell Beckham Jr. leaves, gets into a rhythm after releasing Odell Beckham Jr. Or last year, this defense can get downhill and the Bengals are in drop back passing situations. So that's number one. Number two is being efficient on the ground. You don't have to be it would be great to be explosive and average 10 yards a carry, But if you're getting 4.5 yards a carry and efficient, and you're giving Joe Burrow 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 2, that's much, much different than we've seen in past matchups. And I think that's a huge one. And then number 3, it is making sure that the Browns crowd hates Deshaun Watson, hates number 4 more at halftime than they do when he's introduced, like Jeff mentioned. So what does that mean? Not let him get into a rhythm. Make sure that you're all over him, that he's throwing incompletes, that he's uncomfortable, and whether that's Sheldon Rankins having a big day, and I think he's due for a big day at some point as a pass rusher. Obviously, we know what Trey Hendrickson brings. B.J. Hill coming off of probably his best game as a Bengal. This defensive front needs to get home. And along with that, obviously, it means don't let Nick Chubb have the magical Disney-like comeback in his first game back. He can have that next week. You don't want him to have it this week. So much, much easier said than done. And they all go pretty hand in hand, because if you're starting fast, you're probably at least efficient on the ground. You're getting off the field early on defense by pressuring Watson and taking care of Nick Chubb. So it all goes hand in hand, but I think those are the 3 things the Bengals need to do to get the first win in Cleveland of the Joe Burrow era.
Yeah, I just want to underline taking advantage of this Cleveland offensive line in the departure of Bill Callahan to Tennessee to go coach for his son. That offensive line, with personnel changes, with injuries, with the departure of their coach, with the quarterback play, with all of the things going wrong with that Browns offense right now, is one of the more vulnerable offensive lines they've played this year. Go back to week 1 against New England for the last, I would say, very questionable offensive line. Trey Henderson against Jedrick Wills on the left side there is a big one that I'm circling. And you talk about turning the crowd or taking the crowd out of it, or whatever you want to call it. You can do that by consistently disrupting Deshaun Watson back there.
For sure. I think regardless of Chubb, you don't want him to get even semi-comfortable back there. And you want him in games like this, you want the crowd to get uneasy quick. And then it just feels like that weight that is on these players' shoulders gets that much bigger.
Of course.
And it's the same way the other way for the Browns. If you get off to a good start, then that weight of 1-5 against the Browns, not winning in Cleveland, that on the Bengals' shoulders gets bigger. And so I think that early on in this game, whoever's getting that weight off their shoulders and feeling good and making plays, that's going to be the team that probably wins this first matchup in the Battle of Ohio this year.
Yeah, you mentioned the fast starts, and I just think of Myles Garrett getting the tee off. Even if he is a little bit diminished, he's still a freak and still a really great player. Or the Browns not having to put the ball in Deshaun Watson's hands and just getting behind a run game. And that's the way these games have really gotten away from the Bengals, in addition to turnovers, which are obviously things that both teams will want to take care of in this game. For more on this game, you can check out Locked On Bengals and Locked On Browns on their respective YouTube pages or podcast streams, wherever you get your podcasts. And that's going to do it for this crossover Thursday. Thanks so much for listening to the Locked On Podcast Network.